This is my interview with Lee Turner. She's running for Trey Gowdy's House seat in South Carolina District 4. It's Thursday, February 1st, 2018. The interview is about an hour. We cover topics including healthcare, taxes, immigration, climate change, and even net neutrality.
Lee, thanks for joining me today and answering a few questions about your campaign in District 4, South Carolina. Really looking forward to understanding a little bit more about your campaign and telling the people I know about you. So here's some questions I have. In your district, the median age in South Carolina District 4, where you're running, is 38 years old. 52% of the population is female. 12% of the population is living below the poverty line. 86% of the population are high school grads or have higher education, with some 30% having a bachelor's degree or higher. Finally, about 7% of the population of District 4 are veterans, with a large slice being Vietnam-era veterans. Given those statistics, why would you be a better choice for District 4 than your two other primary opponents, Chris Chastain and Will Morin?
Well, let me say that, first of all, obviously I'm a female, and that is of great value in today's world. I think we will be more well suited to the climate that we're going to find in D.C. than a male would be. I think I hate to make generalities because one size hardly ever fits all, but I think females, as a rule, sometimes have better negotiating skills, bring less ego to the table. In my case, I'm a very good listener, and when somebody else's truth is better than mine, I hear it every time. Specifically to the 4th district, what attracted me to it is that even though it's a overall considered to be a wealthy district, when you look at the numbers and statistics just as you have, you see I believe the median income in the 4th district is $39,000. And so I knew that that was a good in for someone like me. I have a natural bent, for whatever reason, to appeal to the disenfranchised. I've been writing and cultivating followers extensively since last May, when I became activated, and over and over again, people write to me and tell me my heart is good, my heart is pure, and they know that I'm there for them. I'm a white woman with a college degree, and I have excelled and succeeded in the world of business and have taken care of myself, and now it's time for me to take care of the people who cannot. I've done a lot of work already getting to know the issues in the 4th district. We had some local city council races back in the fall, which I became very heavily involved in, went to all the candidates' forums to learn the local issues. We have issues here of we need better mass transit. We are experiencing extreme gentrification. The working poor are being pushed farther and farther out into the county, and then they have no way to get to work. The downtown businesses are the ones, the hospitality businesses. As you may or may not know, downtown Greenville is a very, very thriving area, and they need those people to come to work for them. So the people who need the employees have a hard time getting them, and the people who want to work have a hard time getting there. I'm an Army brat. My father was an Army colonel who fought in 3 wars, and then he went on, when he retired, he established the ROTC program in Elbert County High School and was the colonel for 20 years. They ended up naming the building after him. So my father wore a uniform for 43 years. I had a brother who went to West Point and who was a Green Beret Special Forces. And so I spent my early teen years in Heidelberg, Germany, which gave me a wonderful worldview about things. So by and large, even though I'm not 38 years old, and I'm not a lot of the things that the people in this district are, I feel like my total package brings to the table what the people of the 4th district need.
That's well said. Great. So Lee, would you consider yourself a moderate Democrat or a progressive Democrat or something else?
I don't like to pigeonhole myself any more than I like to pigeonhole anyone else. Once again, one size fits all rarely fits anyone, and that's why I don't like labels and generalities. So quite frankly, it would depend on the issue. I think on social issues, I'm very progressive. One of my biggest problems in the current administration is Jeff Sessions, who I feel like bangs on our civil liberties every day. It's hardly safe to go to sleep anymore for what might happen overnight at the hand of Jeff Sessions and his group of minions. I, being a business person and having lived in the world of business for 40 years, both running other people's and running my own, I would consider myself fiscally, I call it responsible. I wouldn't call it conservative, but I would call it responsible. And that's why I was so outraged over tax reform, and that is actually what woke me to my current political activism. I've done almost everything there is to do in the world of business. What I do currently and have done the last 3 years is I essentially do tax returns for rich people. So when I heard Steve Mnuchin on the TV late last April waving what was then a one-page of tax reform, and I stopped to listen, and the first 4 subjects out of his mouth I knew were tailor-made tax cuts for Donald Trump and his rich buddies, I said, okay, that's it. People think taxes are too complicated for them to understand, but I have a gift for breaking things down and making them very simple such that the average person can understand. And so that's what launched me into political activism.
Okay, that's a good reason. Yep. Just so I can kind of get a better feel of where you're at in that moderate or progressive realm, I'm just going to ask you what you think about Bernie Sanders. You like him, not like him? Do you agree with him on some things?
You got to love Bernie Sanders. I mean, you got to love his heart. I agree with him on many issues. I feel, quite frankly, I didn't feel like either Bernie or Hillary were exceedingly electable for a variety of reasons. I think Bernie scares people. They scream, "Oh, socialist, socialist," but yet his brand of socialism is becoming, dare I say, more mainstream, or should I say more accepted by many average Americans, or certainly average Democrats. Hillary, I feel like, was not only, was she the first female up for the job, I think she was the most qualified candidate that has ever stepped forward at any time of any gender. She was so qualified, but yet she had so much baggage, and Hillary, you either loved her or you hated her. And I've been, of course, watching her for a long time, and quite frankly, she started her hater group when she tried to do health care for Bill as far back as 1993. And it just, she just piled it on from there. So I admire them both greatly. I agree with much of what they say and bring to the table. I love Bernie for the people he motivated and activated and brought to the table. But one advantage I have to being new to the political scene is I'm not weighed down by baggage from either side, and I'm the type that my focus is steely, and I have 2 buckets. I have one bucket, does it create GDP? And the other bucket is luxury America cannot afford. And that's the way I go about neutralizing hot button issues. I'll talk to you about it if I think it's going to build GDP for America, and if I don't, we're going to let somebody else talk about it some other day.
Okay. Well, that leads me to my next question. There's almost certainly some Trump voters in your district. How do you plan on winning some of them over as a Democrat, or in your opinion, is that even possible?
It is absolutely possible, and I'll tell you, I've already done a lot of it. As I may have mentioned, I started writing on Facebook. I spun off a page off of my Facebook page back in May, and I named it JETS, for Jobs, Education, Truth and Tolerance, and Security. And I started writing like a mad person every day, all day long. And but I was determined not to throw rocks, not to insult, not to mention Republican, Democrat, or any person at all unless it was pertinent to the particular subject which I was discussing. And so you learn to spot the Trump base from the get-go, that 35%, and you can talk all day long and you'll never make a dent in their thinking one little bit. But there's that other 20% or so that voted for Trump either because they were anybody but Hillary's, or they were just they thought he would be okay. And you'd be amazed if you start talking to those people and keep talking to them, you will find a subject on which you agree.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And once you do that, you can move forward. I have Trump followers all over the state of South Carolina that share my stuff on their page, and they say, I voted for Trump and I'm a Republican, but you need to listen to this lady because she makes sense. I deal in the facts and the figures, and I try to stress, if we don't find that sweet spot of mutual benefit, all we're doing is creating legislation that the next party is going to overturn. And to arrive at mutual benefit, you must hear the two sides to every story, and until you've heard it, you haven't heard the story. And the other side might not be exactly what you want, but or what you want to hear. But in the final analysis, everything has to be a little bit good for you and a little bit good for all of us. And until it achieves that, it's no good. And because I stay on the high road and I talk in facts and figures, and every now and then somebody will come along and say something, and I say, I agree with that. I understand where you're coming from. You'd be amazed at how far you can get. I strongly feel that I can walk into a Republican room with my 40 years of background knowledge and success, and say some things that, without compromising myself and my democratic ideals, but I feel like I can talk enough sense that people will listen to me and start following me and see what I say and come to our side. I feel very strongly about that, and I feel like I have the strongest chance of doing that of any of my opponents because of my background and ability to convey common sense based on facts and figures and knowledge.
Okay, great. So, on a different topic, what's your position on climate change?
Well, I think it's real, and I was exceedingly upset when Trump pulled out of the Paris Accord, and I'm upset of all the tables he's walked away from, because in my opinion you have to be in the game to influence the game, and once you walk away from the table, you've lost a lot. I'm delighted that enough people and businesses and companies in America feel strongly enough about climate change that they're going to continue on their path regardless of what Trump has done or not done. I started work at Turner Broadcasting in 1980. Actually worked on the audit from my Pricewaterhouse days as far back as 1978, and Ted Turner was a huge environmentalist from the get-go. I mean, back in those days, if you wanted a cup of coffee, you better bring your own cup, because there was no styrofoam and there was no paper, and that sort of thing. So I've been an environmentalist from way back, not actively doing things other than what I could do personally, but recognizing the value of it, the necessity of it. I believe that the earth is not an endless commodity to do with what we choose, but that we are stewards of it, and if we do not taking care of it seriously, there's going to be a huge price to pay for generations to come.
All right, so I'm going to just veer off for just a second. Speaking for the younger people, it's a really important topic, climate change. So if they were to support you, you would be a solid vote in the House of Representatives in the future for climate change related issues?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, in my opinion, it's not something to fool around with. It's serious. Not only is it serious today, it was serious decades ago, and
okay.
it's only because of the steps that have been taken so far by those serious about it that we're even in as good a shape as we are right now. I mean, I can only imagine, if things had been the status quo for the last several decades, where we would be today.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, let me move on. So you have a quote about health insurance that I want to ask you about. So can you explain this? Quote, I believe our best bet to ensure every American citizen, as our country and economy now stand, is a public option for those with pre-existing conditions and in financial straits. So tell me, what would that public option look like?
And that, quite frankly, that quote is at this point probably not said exactly as I would like for it to be said, but healthcare is a complicated subject, as you might imagine, and I managed it over a period of about 13 years as a CFO in 2 different companies, and I've thought about it long and hard. But first of all, I believe very, very firmly in the individual mandate. I believe without it, it's one of the legs of stability of the Affordable Care Act. I won't even tell you how extreme my views are on people who don't think they should have to have it. But yes, but my whole thought process on this, and again, I need to go back and say it more clearly, is that we have asked the insurance industry to do things in the Affordable Care Act that they're not designed to do. They're not designed to insure pre-existing conditions. They're not designed to insure no lifetime limits. But rather than put those people who have those issues out on their own and make them buy their own health care for which they couldn't possibly pay, it's my belief that the subsidies that now exist for Obamacare, the taxes that were set up in 2013, the net investment income tax and the additional Medicare tax, I believe that pool of funds should be used as to subsidize folks with pre-existing conditions and in need of no lifetime limits. Frankly, I hesitate to breathe the word single payer because it's so inflammatory to so many. But in reality, about 60% of America is on single payer now, between veterans, government, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, CHIP. It's single payer now. I grew up on single payer as an Army brat and lived much of my life on it. My mother, when she died, she died of a brain tumor, but she had good insurance, and she had TRICARE and Medicaid, and she never came out of pocket for anything. So somehow we're going to have to, but yet we can't say, okay, single payer, let's go do it. The implications are too vast. I believe the statistics show that between 16 and 20% of the American economy is tied to the healthcare industry. I believe about 2.6 million people work in that industry. And it is an industry in which people can thrive and succeed without higher education and things like that. So it's a valuable service. But until we figure out a way to pull out of the market as it exists now, the things that the insurance companies are not designed to do, we are not going to moderate premiums. Quite frankly, my personal premiums in the open market have quadrupled in the last 4 years. The rate of inflation of healthcare has outpaced the rate of the normal rate of inflation by 4 times over the last several decades, and has outpaced the twice the number. I'm getting mixed up on my statistics here, but so my plan is to do something in the interim. Pull out the pre-existing conditions and the no lifetime limits, have them be funded by the subsidies to stabilize the premium market and get it back to where it should be, and then look at the next step. It's a big, complicated subject that we have to take little baby steps along the way. And ideally, we'll get to the point that everybody's insured in a very basic coverage situation. Say, for instance, bronze level, what would be considered a bronze level policy in today's world, supplemented by additional coverages that people, can opt to buy or not. But the damage that's been done thus far by repealing the individual mandate, I expect to be significant. I think people in those red counties that voted for Trump, who still have their local hospitals, many of which are one of the most significant employers in their area, will be in for a rude awakening and wonder what has happened when we go back to the days of people not being required to be covered. I think the states that have not expanded Medicaid all need to do so, because there are people that just fall in that hole. They do not qualify for ACA subsidies, and they can't get Medicare. So they are the ones that need it most, are flapping in the wind.
Yeah.
So,
so true.
And healthcare is such a complicated thing. You've got 3 pieces. You've got the premium, you've got the healthcare cost, and then you got the big pharma, and they all need to be attacked. Other countries around the world have figured it out, are doing it right, and in my opinion, we need to get over the fear of single payer. I mean, good grief, if it's good enough for our military, if it's good enough for our government, surely we can make it work. And in my opinion, we would already be closer to that spot were it not for the lobbying strength of the healthcare industry, the insurance industry and the healthcare providers and the pharma. And it's one reason we need to clean out the House of Representatives. Until we start breaking those big money chains, that's our only hope.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, let me move on to a different topic. You also stated, quote, tax reform should always be budget neutral. So, do you believe a future Congress may have to vote to take some or all of the corporate tax cuts just enacted in December of 2017 back, because the country may be facing a budget deficit crisis in the future? And would you be willing to cast a yes vote on this if it did occur?
First, let me say resoundingly, yes, yes, yes. I would like to repeal the whole tax reform bill and start over. Let me back up and say, too, I should probably restate, tax reform should always be budget neutral. Nothing should always be anything. There are times when you see the need for it, but I have preached on the street long and hard and posted video after video after video about this particular tax reform. And what has happened is the GOP, using all the shiny objects and diversionary tactics, has led the American public, down the path to think that this is a good idea for them. They immediately pulled out the itemized deductions and then went little by little, started giving them back to make us think we got something. And I told everybody, I said, do not go for the shiny objects. That's what they want you to do, because they don't want you to focus on the fact that they're doing away with the AMT, which is alternative minimum tax, and doing away with the estate tax and reducing the tax rate on pass-through entities. And in the beginning, they were also going to repeal the net investment income tax, the one that funds Obamacare subsidies. I do think they had the good sense to leave the net investment income tax in there because they knew it was a good bargaining chip to use later on. But if you look at the 1 year of Donald's taxes that we know, the 2005 that was leaked earlier, he paid $38 million in taxes in 2005, which was an effective tax rate of 25%, which is not disgraceful for him or for us. Most people whose tax returns I do in that realm pay closer to 33%, but nonetheless, 25% is semi-respectable. That said, of the $38 million he paid, $31 million of it was AMT, the alternative minimum tax. And yes, and the alternative minimum tax came about as an equalizing factor between the wealthy, who typically have passive income, which they can figure out how to shelter in one way or another, and the wage earner, who they're going to fall in their tax bracket wherever they are, period, the end. And so it was designed to be a tax burden equalizer between the common man and the wealthy. And so, as I said, 31 million of Donald's 38 million in 2005 was AMT, and then when you take the remaining 7 million and reduce it, because of course it's all pass-through entity income, I guesstimated that his effective tax rate would have been anywhere between 3.5% and 5%.
Wow.
Yes. And so, in my opinion, this particular tax reform is nothing more than a giveaway to the rich and a fleecing of America. Now, there are people, many common men, wage earners, that will argue till they're blue in the face that they got their little $500 bonus last year and they're getting an extra $14 a week in their paycheck. And I say, yes, dear, but you're borrowing that money from your children and your grandchildren, and your tax benefits are going to expire by 2025, and the corporate cuts are permanent. And what's going to happen in 2025 is the Congress is going to say, we can't possibly let those things expire. We have to, it'll be too unpopular. We have to extend them. So, in fact, the $1.4 trillion tax tab on this reform is going to be much higher, and that $1.4 trillion amounts to $4,300 for every man, woman, and child in America. So if you've got a family of 4, do the math. You better save $17,000 in taxes over the next 8 years, else you've paid, to buy into tax reform, not to mention your children are going to pay for it anyway. And on the corporate end, the corporate tax rate, top rate had been 35%, but the effective tax rate, after all the loopholes, was 18%. Well, they have lowered the 35% top corporate rate to 21%, but they didn't close the loopholes. So what does that mean? The corporations are now going to be paying 5% while you're still effective or could possibly paying 35%? So long story short, the wage earner is getting the shaft, and the wealthy and the corporations are getting the payoff. And of, every day you see new propaganda ads on television about the benefit of all these middle class tax cuts.
Yeah.
But if you pay attention and get to the end and see who put the ad on TV, you'll find it's people like American Action Network, which is designed to attack Democratic candidates and elect Republican candidates. Why the heck do we think the Koch brothers are slotted to spend $400 million over this next period of time to hype tax reform? I mean, don't you think there's something in it for them? The Mercers, Robert Mercer has a $6.8 trillion tax assessment with his old hedge fund company flapping in the wind, and he supported Ted Cruz first. Well, Ted Cruz was going to abolish the IRS. So, and guess who I think he was going to do that for? The Mercers. Well, when the Mercers saw Ted Cruz wasn't going to win, they took Kellyanne with them and went to Donald. So I can just imagine what Donald, has promised them. But the Mercers are trying to get out from under a $6.8 billion tax assessment. And the Koch brothers are spending, and the Americans for Prosperity, that's the name of their group, and it's Americans for Their Prosperity, and they're going to send the rest of us to the poorhouse.
Yeah,
so,
it's all about the money. Follow the money. It's what all of this is about, and people need to realize that. Okay, let me move on to something else. Now, just yesterday, Trey Gowdy let us know that he's not running for re-election, which I thought was awesome that I get to talk to the person who's trying to get his seat. That was very cool how that worked out.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, so the last Democrat that ran against Trey in the 2016 general election got about 31% of the vote in District 4 and lost the election. So what are you going to do differently as a Democrat if you win the primary in June 12th and move on to the general election in order to get into the House?
Well, first of all, I'm going to try to raise a lot more money than it was Chris Fideli who ran against Trey in 2016. Trey raised $1.9 million, he spent $1.6 million, and Chris raised $100,000. And so I knew from the get-go that $2 million is my goal. And because of the group of followers and supporters that I have been cultivating long before I ventured into the world of Twitter, I have many progressives and activists following me from all over the country, not to mention my Army brat base of friends, not to mention my years in media in Atlanta, from which I still have many strong connections. So part of it is going to be all about the fundraising. I'm a shameless hawker when I know I have a product to sell. And I also, my ploy from the beginning, frankly, because I didn't know what else to do, was to cultivate and gather followers from all of the realms of progressives, our indivisible people, our revolution, the resistance groups, the liberal veterans groups. You name them, I have found them, and I'm on their pages with my stuff every day. And my ploy there was to cultivate all those people first and then bring them to the Democratic fold. Quite frankly, the Democratic Party really won't do anything for me or anyone else until someone is the nominee. And that's a long way away. I wish the primary were sooner, but it's not until June 12th. So my ploy has been to try to neutralize the Bernie-Hillary factions and say, let's look forward, guys. All this fighting heretofore gave us Donald Trump. I mean, not only did Hillary get 3 million more votes than Donald, but another 8 million votes were spread out amongst the independent groups. And so in truth, Donald lost by 11 million votes. And but we also know the biggest voter bloc in 2016 was the non-voter. I believe 49.3% or something like that was the non-voter bloc. And so I intend to work very hard to inspire and give hope to the disenfranchised in this area, make them think that they do in fact have a reason to vote, that there is in fact someone who will represent them in Washington. And so I have already made significant inroads there and expect to continue to do so. And finally, as I've said before, I feel like I can walk into a Republican room and come away with some followers. So it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. I'm a guerrilla warfare kind of girl. I personally said, let's do this on the down low and build this groundswell such that by the time we've got some power behind us, they won't really even know we're here yet. And even though all of us who are running in the Democratic side have all just recently declared, I have been working at building and talking and speaking since last May, and I have the followers to show for it. Also, amazingly enough, the Greenville and Spartanburg areas are a real hotbed of activism. Not only is Chris Fideli still sometimes on the scene, but Deb Mara, who ran against Trey in 2012, is a huge leader here, and she's taken me under her wing. And we're out on the street every single Tuesday from 12 to 1 and have been for a year. It doesn't matter if it's raining or snowing or ice or what. We're out there making our voices known and our opinions known every time. When Ivanka came to town, we were out there. When Trump came to town, we were out there. We had a huge women's march turnout this year. So long story short, I feel like all of the pieces of the puzzle are here to be utilized and get us where we need to go.
Okay. Quick question on the side here. Since Trey announced he's not running yesterday, is there anybody you're aware of that's running on that side that you've heard any names or?
Oh yes, they popped right up, and
I didn't do my homework, so if you
well,
let me.
Unfortunately, I don't have their names yet on the tip of my tongue.
Okay.
One of them is Timmons, and I believe he's a state either senator or representative now. He's apparently rich because he's already said he's going to use $500,000 of his own money. I was interviewed yesterday, or perhaps the day before, by somebody at the Greenville paper. But when he wrote his article, the headline was as if, okay, here's the 3 Republicans that we'll choose from to replace Gowdy. I'm like, wait a darn minute. I don't think so. But so yes, there's 3 that's probably the moment Trey announced.
Probably already pre-selected as backups, probably already. So.
Right, and quite frankly, there's been underground current for several weeks about something's up with Trey. Probably as soon as he resigned from the ethics committee. I had thought about it even earlier than that, just because of the climate.
Yeah.
A lot of things. I have felt like maybe there was something a little dicey by Trey being on the transition team, that maybe there was something there.
You're being too kind. I would say something different, but I won't.
Well, I'm trying to be kind.
Yeah. So let me ask you something on a different subject here. Would you promise to protect Social Security and Medicare from future cuts, even if it were not budget neutral? Would you make that promise?
Promise, 100%. You know, we paid in, we earned it, we rely on it, and it must be protected. It must be protected.
Okay, good. And can you also tell me how you would incentivize higher education that you mentioned?
You know, education,
in a nutshell, you know?
Yeah, education is another tough one. Quite frankly, it's the nearest and dearest to my heart. I have another bucket of things. Some things just need to be fixed, like health care and the tax reform, and other things actually are long-term solutions, and education is the number one long-term solution. I know when I came out of college with an accounting degree, cum laude, I knew stuff, but I didn't know how to think. No one had taught me how to think. And luckily for me, I went to work at Price Waterhouse, where there were a bunch of brilliant people who are going to, make you do it right no matter what. And that's where I learned how to think. And once you learn how to think, you can do anything because you can figure it out. The cost of higher education, and this is where I was mixed up on my percentages before, the cost of higher education has increased fourfold the amount of normal inflation and twice at the rate of health care. So we have a whole generation of millennials that is crippled with student loan debt. Crippled.
Mm-hmm.
They are not buying houses. They are not buying cars. They are not starting families. They are living with their parents. And I don't know why higher education has increased so much, because it's certainly not going to the teachers. Is it going to the football team? I don't know. But one other problem there, it's kind of one of those unintended consequences. Once we started dumping lottery money into funding scholarships for college, it sent the demand through the roof. An SAT score that used to be considered, passable to go anywhere you wanted or reasonably, is no longer the case. If you weren't way up there. But I think that increased demand has, unfortunately funded or accelerated the cost. But somehow, and I certainly don't have my math done on this, but my goal would be to have at least free community college, and for 2 years, either that or technical training for 2 years, and then if one wanted to go on, figure out how to make the rest of it be affordable. But I look back at my situation, and I paid for my last 2 years of college myself, and I owed $3,000.
Wow.
When I got out of school. Now I worked and paid for my rent and groceries and whatnot. So all I did borrow was just tuition, but $3,000. So and my first job was, oh gosh, I made more than I ever thought I was going to make, and it was $13,000. At Price Waterhouse. But I could pay off a $3,000 debt, even at those amounts. So it's a huge problem that we're not teaching our kids enough in through the high school years. When you talk to students from other countries that come here, they say, gosh, my first 2 years of college here was like high school to me. And I think we're teaching them the wrong things. In some cases, we're not tough enough on them. We need to get serious with our kids in high school and teach them how to think. I say in my personal situation, if I had never had another math class after 8th grade, and I use math in everything I do, but if I had never had another math class after 8th grade, I could do everything I do today. And that's because I had a good teacher who pounded and pounded and pounded the theory, and you never forget it.
Yeah, right. I agree. Okay, I have a wonky kind of question for you here. So the U.S. Supreme Court, I'm sure you're aware, has heard Gill v. Whitford challenging Republican-drawn districts in Wisconsin, and this could have an enormous effect in South Carolina. So what are your thoughts on how this yet-to-be-announced Supreme Court ruling that's expected sometime this year could change your own potential general election race in District 4?
I don't know that it's going to change it specifically in District 4, but gerrymandering is not a wonky subject at all to me. In my going to every single thing I can find to go to, I have learned all about gerrymandering and how it works, how you can take South Carolina is a perfect example. If you look at the statistics, South Carolina is actually 56% Republican and 44% Democrat. So one would think with 7 representatives that we would have a breakdown of 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats. Well, as you can imagine, we have 6 Republicans and 1 Democrat. And that 1 Democrat is African American, Mr. Clyburn, and they've gerrymandered his district, so, oh yeah, he'll keep it, and gerrymandered all the others. So that's one thing we have really, really gone to work on in this state. And we are aware that the census is coming up in 2020, and the redistricting will start happening in 2021 and 22. And if we don't get busy at the state level and demand that we have an independent enterprise that does the redistricting, we know we have nothing more than the fox guarding the hen house. And I think there are about 5 states that do now have the independent commissions. But, long term, it's in everyone's best interest to do this, because right now your party may be in power, but next time it might be the other guy. And what makes gerrymandering so much more lethal now than it's ever been before is because of the digital age. I mean, they can they can get her done in a heartbeat as far as figuring out how to redistrict to make it work for them. So, unfortunately, it is a state-by-state issue. Oddly enough, the 4th district is the smallest little round circle you could possibly imagine, which is one thing that drew me to it. You go over the border into the 3rd district, and honey, it's 11 counties and, span from here to there. So we're fortunate here in the 4th district because we have such a high density of population, such that the 4th district is only almost all of Greenville and Spartanburg County, with just the outside edges partly being in the 3rd district and the outside edges on the other side being in the 5th district. So we, again, I'm fortunate in the 4th district because of the high density of population we have just spread amongst 2 counties. As you may or may not be aware, every district is about, once each district exceeds 700,000 people, you get a new one. We got a new one in 2000, the last census, 2010. And so right now every district in South Carolina has 671,000 people in it, all of which Trey Gowdy immediately forgot about when he went to Washington and became the witch hunter for the GOP.
He did.
But if you want, I can back up and tell you who the candidates are for the Republican candidates. Yes, William Timmons is the one I just mentioned, and he's in the state legislature. Mm-hmm. Dan Hamilton, mm-hmm. He has a real estate firm and he's a House member. Mm-hmm. And then Josh Kimbrell is the chairman of the Spartanburg County GOP.
Okay. I got it. I'll check into those. So, what's your position on the Dreamer situation? How do you feel about that?
I love my Dreamers. You wouldn't believe the ones in Spartanburg County, and there too I go to everything that they have, and I've gotten to know many, many of them, and they are all shining stars of the community, which any parent would love to claim as their own. Any community would love to have lived there. I before I even attached the Dreamer issue and the wall issue in my mind, as I'm learning everything as I go along, I knew darn well we did not need a wall. If you look at the original sponsors of the wall bill from back last March, if memory serves, not a single one of them lived in a border state. They were from Mississippi and Alabama and good old, what's his name, Steve King, from Iowa or wherever he's from, who hates everybody.
Yeah.
Nobody who lived in the border states was screaming for a wall. And statistics show that the majority of the illegal immigrants fly in with a valid visa and stay. In my opinion, Trump wants that wall as a tribute to himself, and so he can give all his buddies in real estate, a big project to do and be a hero to them too. It's all about Trump's ego and the fact that that was part of his red meat with his base, and now he says, "Oh well, I got to do it. And quite frankly, I don't think he feels like he's got to do anything except what he wants to do, and he wants to build that wall as a tribute to himself. Quite frankly, it will be named Trump's folly if he does build it. But as much as I dislike the thought of government shutdowns, and as much damage as it can potentially do, I would, we need a clean Dream Act with no attachments whatsoever. I feel that way, and there's a large contingent of people in the 4th District that feel that way. And frankly, I went to an event where Lindsey Graham was recently, and after I grabbed his hand and wouldn't let go till I asked my questions, I followed him, and once I found him, he was completely encircled by this whole group of DACA kids.
Really?
Oh yes, it was a beautiful sight. And they were grilling him and whatnot, but I think because of the exposure he has had to them on a day he talks some sense, it's because he's seen them. He knows who they are and what they can do for America. And it's a complicated subject too, but quite frankly, it's fed by tribalism, the folks that want not to make America great again, but to make America white again. And America will never be white again. America gets browner by the day, and hey, more power to us.
Yeah, and one thing that's not complicated at all about this conversation is that Donald Trump promised us that the Mexicans would pay for that wall. And he needs to either explain why he's not having that or make them pay. So I don't want to add too much editorial comment, but he definitely needs to be held accountable for that comment.
Absolutely, and and as far as I'm concerned, his continual insistence upon that was nothing more than just another meat waving to the base thing. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to build that wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. Rah, rah, rah. And of course, we all knew, people with sense knew that was not going to be the case. And, it's just one more mess Donald has created for us with his mouth.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm at the final question, and this question is one of my most important questions because I'm sort of in the industry. So what is your position on net neutrality? I assume I know what your position is, but go ahead and tell me.
Well, you do know what it is. I'm was horrified when they overturned it. I've been watching the FCC since the 1980s when I was at Turner Broadcasting, and back in the day before Reagan started dismantling it, a corporation could only own 7 major market television stations, and it was all designed to diminish particular potential influence and things like that. So this is nothing more than one more step down the road to make the rich guys richer, the average citizen pay more or have less of an advantage. I had the good luck of meeting the woman who was on the FCC recently at an MLK gala, and of course she was the one that was on, one of the two that was on our side. But I think it's absolutely unconscionable. I think there's not, one good thing that could be said about it. And also, if you will review the list of contributors to, your senator and representative, in your particular case, I guarantee you will find contributions from someone in the communications industry.
Yeah. So just because I want to put you on the record, you're a solid yes vote or whatever, no vote. You're always going to be in favor of net neutrality in Congress, right? 100%. Nobody's ever going to convince you. Verizon's not going to come through, or Comcast's not going to come through and have a sit down and convince you otherwise, right? Ever. Promise?
Heck no. I'm as hard-headed as they come when it comes to, truth stabs me in the heart. I mean, and it could be your truth that I didn't think was true until I hear it. But there is nothing anybody could say to me about that subject, and quite frankly, a lot of the ones we've talked about today, to convince me otherwise.
Okay. Good. Well, this has really been a great interview. We're just about at an hour, so I thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy, and I wish you the best of luck in the primary. I'm rooting for you, and hopefully also in the general in November. Okay?
Well, I just want to stress once again to you and all of your listeners that the most I'm going to raise out of the 4th District is somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000. The statistics show that, no matter what I do. So for us as a group to be able to send good people to D.C., which we all benefit from, regardless of what state they come from, we must get serious about fundraising. Do not think because you live in Arizona that you cannot help me in South Carolina. And certainly do think, if you live in Arizona and you don't help me in South Carolina, that you probably will not see me in D.C. Whether we like it or not, it's all about the money to a certain degree, and people like you and I, we don't want the big money. We don't want the dark money. We want money from people just like us. So I ask everyone to take it seriously and go get on my Lee Turner for Congress Facebook page. There's an Act Blue site right there, and let's start donating. And the more money I bring in, the more I can encourage others to help. I was on the phone yesterday with Emily's list, and they said, dear, until you raise $200,000 to $250,000 on your own, we don't have anything for you. So this is serious, and I'm asking for everybody's help.
Okay. You shall get it. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much.